by. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome. And we are going to start our meeting with the Bahamas National Anthem. Thank you and good evening. My name is Eric Carey and I am the Executive Director of the Bahamas National Trust, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you to this, our 2020 Annual General Meeting. Our general meeting was postponed because of COVID-19, but we felt it was important that we still hold this annual general meeting because the business of the Bahamas National Trust must continue. I thank each and every one of you, all of our members who have joined this meeting. We value your membership. We value each and every one of you, whether you are part of a corporate, whether you are a corporate member, or you're an individual member, or you are a student member, whether you are in Tibet, Cat Island, or whether you're in Timbuktu, wherever you are all over the world, we welcome you as members of the Bahamas National Trust. Members are the lifeblood of the Bahamas National Trust, and so it is with a distinct pleasure that we welcome you. At this time, I'm going to introduce, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing to you our president, who is Jeffrey Andrews. Jeff has been a member of the Council of the Bahamas National Trust for many years, but Jeff has been a part of the Bahamas National Trust for even longer than that, having spent so many years in a number of national parks. He loves the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park, and he brags about having been there several times already this summer. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to our annual general meeting to lead us through the rest of the program, our president, Mr. Jeffrey Andrews.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much for those kind words. And good evening to all. It certainly is my great pleasure to welcome you to our AGM, albeit we were supposed to be at Government House, but here we are virtually, but that's the world we live in, unfortunately. This is the first opportunity that I've had to speak to you as the members, council members, and guests as president of the Bahamas National Trust. And although theoretically I'm supposed to report on what happened during 2019, given the lateness of this AGM, I'm also going to report on what's happened so far this year. So thank you for being with us, and in particular, thank you to the council members who are on this call tonight. I appreciate your support tonight, and I appreciate all the great support I've had since taking over as president. As many of you know, and if you can't tell, you can see from my lapel pin, this year we celebrated our 60th anniversary. And sorry, in 2019. And we were certainly honored to have, as the pictures indicate, the Prime Minister and the Minister of the Environment, Dr. the Honorable Hubert Minnis and the Honorable Romy Ferreira, come to our celebration at the retreat on the 13th of July, which is our actual founding date. They brought very kind words about the BNT and the great work that we've done for 60 years. And we continue to celebrate that anniversary throughout the rest of the year at all of our major events, which turned out to be very successful. I will start by talking about what happened in early September of 2019. And we all know how Hurricane Dorian was the worst natural disaster that ever struck the Bahamas. And first and foremost, we were most relieved to learn that all of our staff, both on Abaco and Grand Bahama, survived the storm. It was a tense couple of days, and when we got the all clear that everybody had survived, that was the most important thing to us, to hear that they were all still with us. Unfortunately, we had some destruction, certainly in Marsh Harbor. The BNT office and the vehicles were pretty much destroyed. In other parts of Abaco, luckily the Abaco National Park and the Pelican Keys Land and Sea Park, the effects were not as bad because the storm was not directly impacting them. In Grand Bahama, the Rand Nature Center took a good bit of flooding, and the Lucayan National Park had serious coastal erosion, as well as some damage to some of the limited infrastructure that we had there. As I said, luckily the staff were okay. Many of the Abaco staff were relocated to New Providence or other places at the first opportunity. And in Grand Bahama, certainly the staff there got right down to business in helping with the recovery efforts, supporting NEMA, and even providing transport for the Defense Force officers. They then set about documenting the effects of Hurricane Dorian on both the natural resources and the species, as it was very important to learn right away what had happened in those national parks. So the Parks and Science staff, with great support from the National Audubon Society, ABC Birds, the Moore Foundation, and the Perry Institute of Marine Science, conducted rapid ecological assessments in the parks of Abaco and Grand Bahama. The focus was documenting what had happened to the key species and ecosystems such as the Bahama parrot, the Bahama nuthatch, and the coral reefs, because this will be the guide in strengthening these habitats for future storms. During the year, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Discovery Club Leaders Symposium, and they held their annual camp at the RBDF Wilderness Training. The Discovery Club were agents of change during the year, as they promoted the phasing out of the use of single-use plastics within their school communities. And St. Thomas More, as you can see in the picture, led the charge with a campaign at their school that helped to inform their classmates about pollution and the dangers of single-use plastics, but they also raised $400 through their campaign, and they donated to the BNT. So that was a great effort on them. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the Discovery Club this year has faced its challenges since most of the schools are not meeting in person. But thankfully, Portia and the rest of the education team continue to seek out creative ways to have a successful year for the Discovery Clubs. An important milestone that happened during the year was the Bahamas National Trust Amendment Act of 2019, which was laid on the table in the House on October the 2nd by the Minister for the Environment. And it's a strong set of environmental legislation, including the Bahamas National Trust Act. So we congratulate the government on passing this legislation, which has now created a Ministry of Environment as a substantive ministry in law. It's banned the use of certain single-use plastics and created a Department of Planning to bring the regulation of environmental matters under one department. But as far as the BNT Amendment Act, it's a 9-year process, because when there were amendments passed in 2010, there was a drafting error, which caused some challenges with how the council elections were handled. Thankfully now with this act, those have been corrected. Also, we now have a provision for the Minister of the Environment to approve the BNT bylaws. And another important part of this act, though, was to allow our wardens to issue spot fines in national parks when they detect offenses. And this removes the inefficient system of carrying these matters to the magistrate courts, and therefore saves us time and money. And finally, this amendment allows for land gifts to the BNT to be VAT-free. And that's important, because we actually do have a number of people who do want to give land to the BNT who get worried about the taxes. So we want to go officially on the record to thank the Office of the Attorney General, the Minister of the Environment, past BNT President Pericles Melis, ably supported by Lynn Gate, for bringing this process to completion. And it certainly gave me great pride to attend the House of Assembly and support the minister as he tabled this important legislation. And it's also worth noting that several ministers after the session offered congratulatory remarks and had great things to say about the BNT. Another milestone that was reached in April of 2019 was the Leon Levy Plant Preserve became the first institution in the Bahamas to be designated as an accredited botanic garden by the Botanic Gardens Conservation International. This award is recognized for gardens that have, among other things, documented collections, public access, an education program, research capacity, and a long-term strategic plan. And the preserve's long-range plans include providing support for tertiary level research in both botany and plant taxonomy, mentorship programs, and partnerships with regional institutes to promote plant conservation. Like the Glories Award that the ECLSP received not that long ago, this is an international honor that validates the great work being done by the BNT and its staff members at our national parks. Of course, I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to thank Shelby White and her team for the amazing support that the Leon Levy Foundation continues to provide, not only to the Leon Levy Preserve, but to many other areas of the BNT. As I mentioned, towards the end of 2019, we had some very successful year-end events as we celebrated our 60th anniversary. The Wine and Arts Festival, for which we thank the support of Commonwealth Brewery, Alive, and Sherwin-Williams, was one of the most successful ever, and we particularly enjoyed the 60th anniversary members night. The Christmas Jollification had record crowds and once again raised money. Go back one. Thank you, sorry, for the retreat garden, and we were privileged to have both the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Education attend that event. And we're certainly grateful to the loyal sponsors for the Jollification, including Commonwealth Bank, Bahamian Brewery, Bristol Wines, Summit Insurance, Caribbean Bottling, Bahamas Waste, Bahamian Rental, and Freedom Sound, as well as, of course, the BNT staff who contributed greatly to both of these events. Also, we held Festival Noel, which has been running for 24 years in Grand Bahama. And is used to raise support for the national parks there, and it's considered the official start to the local Christmas season. Of course, after Dorian, we had to give serious consideration as to whether or not to hold the event, but we were encouraged by our local partners to do whatever we could to actually have the event, as it was felt that Grand Bahama desperately needed some sense of normalcy and familiarity. Based on that feedback and our desire to boost the local economy, we went ahead and hosted the event, and I must say that I was so happy that my wife and I were able to attend. The community responded enthusiastically as more than 400 people attended, and many of them came to me personally and expressed relief at having to have this opportunity to kind of put all that they'd been going through behind them and look forward to something positive. Everyone was in high spirits, and the crowd of over 400, record crowd of over 400 people helped to raise more than $20,000 to support the post-Dorian recovery of the Grand Bahama National Parks. Moving into 2020, we were very lucky in that we were able to get our annual Cuban pig roast in March, just before the lockdown. I don't know, people must have known that the lockdown was coming in the back of their minds, because the event was sold out a week before, and the events by Alexandra helped coordinate a delicious menu and festive atmosphere. As you can see from the pictures, everyone had a good time. But more importantly, this event supports national park infrastructure, and through the generous support, we raised over $170,000 at that event, and that will go towards building a visitor center at the Lucayan National Park in Grand Bahama. I certainly want to thank all the members who attended and contributed to the cause, but I must acknowledge the BNT staff who did such a great job on the event, and also the 2020 volunteer committee for the pig roast, led by Sarah Manson-Wood, and also assisted by Lynn Andrews and Jasmine Strawn. All in all, it was a great event. Unfortunately, as we left 2020 and as we left 2019, and we thought, you know, even with all the horrors that happened with Dorian, we can start to think positively about 2020. We had great fundraising events both at the end of 19 and early in 20. We had the first time ever we had the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park turn a profit, and we'd had great traffic throughout 2019, even though there were some hiccups when Dorian was around, and we were expecting even better things for 2020. Needless to say, we all know what happened with the pandemic, and I won't go into great details, but we were initially, all the staff was required to stay home when the entire country went into a lockdown. But after reports of horror stories at Bonefish Pond and people illegally fishing there, and also there was other pictures of endangered species being threatened, we were able to appeal to the government, and the wardens were granted essential worker status. So we were at least able to get them back out on the front line, and we're certainly grateful to those wardens who were out on the front line protecting the natural resource of the Bahamas. What we realized quickly was that the economic challenges that the country was facing now with the shutdown of tourism had moved us from expecting a great year in 2020 to actually being concerned about the very survival of the BNT. We had a very short-term emergency fundraising appeal, and this was assisted by Amanda Lindroth, who's a great friend of the BNT, and put some stuff out on social media, and that generated an immediate response. And we thank all those members who supported that. But our big concern was that the fact that we knew the government was hardly bringing in any revenue. We were worried what they may do to our government subsidy. So we went into immediate action using whatever connections we could to appeal to the Minister of Finance as well as the Financial Secretary, and we laid out a case showing how important it was to preserve these natural resources, and not only that, but how important it was for us to be able to retain our employees. And we met with them via Zoom and had a great conversation, but we still had to make measures not knowing what was going to happen with that subvention. around May, we made the very difficult decision, and it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life, and certainly the hardest decision I had to make as the president, but to back the decision to cut back the hours of most staff members and actually put some on furlough, those who were not able to work. That was truly hard to do, and we just had to do it at the time. Thankfully, our discussions with the government paid off, and on July the 21st, we received the full amount of subvention that we had anticipated for the period to December 31st. So after initially putting hours down and furloughing people for 12 weeks, we were thankfully able to bring many of them back to full-time, and others remained on reduced hours. Of course, with the current conditions, where possible, staff are continuing to work from home rather than crowd the office. And those who do go into the office, we make sure that they're done on a rotation basis, and so that we can observe all the right social distancing. The Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park continued to work throughout the lockdown because they still had boats there. There were some boats there when the lockdown started, and then with some of the openings, there were boats continuing to come there. So for the safety and protection of the people in the park, we had to keep them working. And that at least generated some revenue. And while we know that these tough economic times are going to continue for a while, the BNT is pressing forward. The development and events team have been working tirelessly to create a virtual fundraiser, combining both the Wine and Arts Festival and the Jollification. The team in Grand Bahama is similarly planning a virtual festival Noel. We are also planning to virtually recognize our conservation champions in early November. So the BNT marches on, and I strongly encourage all our members to continue to participate in these events, which we know they look forward to every year. And of course, you'll be hearing more about this in the very near future. But finally, the BNT continues to work very hard to welcome visitors when the country does reopen, so that all the necessary safety protocols are in place, and that because we realize that the national parks are a great opportunity for outdoor experiences, which is what people are looking for now. I have to say, throughout this pandemic, and even when the hours were reduced, I have been moved and totally impressed by how productive the BNT staff has remained, despite the challenges of COVID-19. As I mentioned, our park wardens continue to work hard, but not only that, there's many other accomplishments, such as the education staff, who've completed the revision of 70 fact sheets, 10 field guides, and 10 educational presentations. They've also been developing online materials for Discovery Club and Navigator programs, and working to create virtual national park tours to support the Park Experience program. The science team organized the virtual Bahamas Natural History Conference, which held 12 virtual sessions starting from June the 10th. The sessions were very well done and are recorded and available on YouTube. So if anybody wants to go look at them, I encourage them to do so. And we hope to get back to holding those sessions in person as soon as possible. The science and their team also continue to implement monitoring of wildlife and other resources during the pandemic. The development team coordinated the Lifeline for Conservation campaign, which you'll hear more about shortly, and also looked at other longer-term strategies as well for fundraising. Most importantly, as environmental stewards, the BNT never stopped reporting on subjects that matter, especially where national parks are concerned. We've held the government to account, offered our expertise, and conducted science-based assessments on subjects such as the spread of stony coral tissue loss disease, the aragonite mining proposals in Andros, seafloor damage assessment of cruise ship anchors in the Berry Islands, the oil spill that occurred as a result of Hurricane Dorian in Grand Bahama, and most recently, a very important statement about the exploratory oil well that's being scheduled for December down near the Sal Marine Protected Area. The BNT's position on any of these can be found on our website or on our Facebook page. Most importantly right now, I want to again publicly acknowledge and thank our dedicated and loyal staff for their strong work ethic and dedication to the national parks and the Bahamas National Trust throughout these difficult times. The BNT is the lead implementer for two major grant projects that will benefit national parks and provide opportunities to mitigate the effects of climate change, which we all know is so important right now. The highly anticipated Global Environment Facility 2020 project was approved in February of this year. The total value of the project is approximately $18.2 million, and the project will provide approximately $6.2 million in funding for 5 national parks: the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park, Mariah Harbor Key National Park, Bonefish Pond, Lucayan National Park, and the Andros Westside National Park. The project supports the hiring and equipping of 5 wardens, ecosystem zoning plans, park management plans, species and conservation monitoring plans, as well as the installation of renewable energy systems at 3 national parks. This project has been being led by the Parks Department with support from Science and Education, and I can tell you how hard they worked throughout all this to keep these projects going. The Bahamas Risk Resilient Integrated Coastal Management Program is funded by the IDB and is implemented by the Ministry of Works. The BNT has been selected as a single source consultant for providing studies and planning of green infrastructure, such as restoring coral reefs, planting mangroves, and rebuilding sand dunes to help build resilience in communities along the shorelines of Grand Bahama and Andros. Each site that the BNT will be working in is connected in some way to a national park or protected area. And we will receive $2 million to execute this 5-year project. The important thing about these restoration projects is they will provide the government with templates for building resilience in coastal communities across the archipelago. As I mentioned, realizing how dire our financial situation had become without our major fundraisers, or we didn't know what the status was going to be, and also knowing that donations were going to be cut by people who were obviously being hurt economically by the pandemic. So we launched the Lifeline for Conservation campaign with a goal of raising $500,000 by December 31st, 2020. And this campaign was aimed at demonstrating how important it was to keep the wardens and the scientists on the front line, protecting our parks, keeping conversation in the Bahamas moving forward, and not allowing COVID-19 to set back all the critical work that we've achieved over the last 60 years. The campaign has progressed well, and under the excellent volunteer leadership of the Advancement Committee Chair, Peter Andrews, and along with myself and council member Hank Ferguson, Eric, Lynn, and the rest of the development team. We've gotten great support from the corporate community, and we've reached out to and private donors, persons who we know are friends of the BNT, but maybe for whatever reason had not supported us in the past, or had, but maybe not recently. And we are so grateful to J.S. Johnson, SuperValue, Allen Exploration, the Aquila Foundation, Dalbinus Agencies, SuperValue Food Stores, Focal Holdings, Caribbean Bottling, the Tomlinson family, Mr. and Mrs. Dana Wells, and Gregory Clear for their support. And, you know, it's tough going and meeting with people and asking for financial support at times like this. And we certainly tried to target companies who we felt were at least functioning in some way in the current economy. But we are so grateful that these companies and individuals have stepped forward. And I want to encourage our members and our corporate sponsors to consider supporting the BNT during these difficult times. Because once tourism does come back, our national parks are going to be so important, and recreation and education are going to be even more important in this post-COVID-19 world. And I must say that other long-term fundraising campaigns are in the works, and you will hear more about those. And what we're really doing is looking at a long-term sustainable campaign to build basically an endowment, so that when there are fluctuations and we have to worry about whether the government or can support us or not, we'll hopefully have the income from our endowment to keep us going. As Eric mentioned, I did have the privilege of making 2 visits to the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park. This one is in Rocky Dundas. We happened to swim in there at just the right time as the sun was shining through that hole. And I have to say that despite all the challenges that I've faced since assuming the presidency, going down to the Exuma Keys and spending time there and remembering, as Eric indicated, I spent so much time there as a youngster, the outstanding natural beauty of this park really recharged my batteries and inspired me to continue with the leadership and fundraising that we need for the BNT. I want to thank all of you for attending this evening and let you know that we will continue to do our best to keep you informed about what the BNT is doing. We're now happy to entertain questions from the membership, and if anybody has put any questions in the chat or wants to raise their hand, please do so at this time.
Anna or Elijah, do you see any questions in the chat or any hands raised? No, I don't see any.
No questions at the moment.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. At this time, the minutes for the last AGM were previously circulated, and we do need to go through the formality of approving those. So I would like to accept a motion to approve the minutes of the last AGM. And you can do so either by raising your hand or indicating in the chat.
Thank
Okay,
you. We have raised hands.
Okay, wonderful. If there are no objections, then I will accept that the minutes are approved. And we will now move on to the treasurer's report. And I'd like to thank, obviously, Simon, who's worked so very hard for many years as treasurer and has just come back from a trip to the Exuma Keys himself. So he's all refreshed and energized too. But Simon, please proceed with your treasurer's report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. And I think hopefully everyone can see me. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Yes, thank you and welcome all. And it's a pleasure to be with you this evening, albeit remotely. Before I start talking about our results for the prior year, I'd like to welcome our new Director of Finance and Operations, Dr. Katia Johnson, who joined us a little earlier on in the pandemic and has frankly done an amazing job of helping manage the numbers and the cash flows through these very difficult last several months. I thought I would just, albeit time has moved on, my role at these meetings is to present the financial statements, the audited financial statements of the Trust for the prior year, and our year end is December 31st, 2019. These financial statements were signed by our auditors, Baker Tilly, who've been the auditors for several years now. And we managed to get these signed off a little later than normal because of the commencement of the pandemic, but they were signed on April 22nd, which is, I'm still proud to say, is ahead of many of the regulated entities in the Bahamas. So thanks to the finance team and Baker Tilly for getting these financial statements completed on time. I would note for those that want to take a deeper look at the financials, these are available on our website, on the BNT website, and along with prior years. So if you want to have a longer read than I'm going to go through tonight, they're available there. One thing before I get into the numbers, I'd like to just mention, some people ask every now and then, is we do have a qualified opinion in our auditor's report, and it's really for two things. One is, much like many non-profit organisations who have the same qualified opinion, we get some of our income for the BNT from events, contributions, gifts, donations, and a good portion of these are often received in cash. And the auditors, because of the nature of the activities, and the auditors aren't always able to satisfactorily audit those receipts. as such, have this qualification in the port. I think as a percentage of our total income, it's not a large number that we receive in cash, but nevertheless there is an element. And then secondly, real property. The BNT owns about 69 acres of land that's been donated in various places over the years, and we also have 99-year leases on about 1.9 million acres of land and sea parks across the Bahamas. And the land that's owned by the BNT, we carry at a nominal value, and of $1 or thereabouts. And the same for the 99-year leases. They have, I think it's a sterling £1 lease for some of those going back some time now. So under normal accounting standards, we would normally have to account for those at their valuation, but because these land and sea assets are not to be resold, they're held for preservation, the BNT does not carry them at any value. Otherwise, it would distort the financial position of the BNT. So we got an otherwise clean audit report signed by Baker Tilly, as I mentioned. So at the balance sheet, we have two funds. One is our general fund, and the other is the Heritage Fund. The Heritage Fund is the endowment fund of the BNT. It was set up in 1988 by a resolution of the council under the then president, Lynn Holowesko. And the resolution for the establishment of this fund very clearly mandates that the capital of the Heritage Fund cannot be used, and it's to be invested to earn income. But the income from the Heritage Fund can be used in operations. And the tendency has been over the last several years for the BNT not to draw too much of the income, to save that income for a rainy day. But over the years since 1988, when the fund was first established, the fund has earned around $6 million, and for about 5.7 million of that has been spent over the years, more in the 90s, before the BNT had alternative revenue streams, revenue generating streams. So the current assets of the Heritage Fund are about 3.8 million. After the pandemic hit, we saw some depreciation, in particular on our Templeton investments, and that's come back somewhat, but certainly we don't expect to see large amounts of income in 2020 from the funds. And you'll see 2.1 million financial assets. Those are government securities, government of the Bahamas securities. Some of those are being liquidated, subject to a resolution of the EXCO, including the income that still exists in the Heritage Fund, which will be put aside and only used in fixed deposits, which will be put aside and only used if absolutely necessary in operations as this pandemic continues. You'll see total current assets of about $1 million, and that's fairly stable year on year at this time of year. And property and equipment down the bottom there of 1.3 million. That's the investments in the various parks, the park assets, vehicles, boats. So our total assets are 6.6 million, of which 3.8 million is in the Heritage Fund. And then on the liability side, we had our liabilities are generally fairly low on a monthly working capital basis, but the deferred contributions you see here are 688,000. that is actually cash that's been received, or investments which have not yet been deployed according to the wishes of the donors or the non-profit organisations that submitted those funds. So we don't recognize those until they're actually used. So that leaves the BNT as at September 30th, 2019, with a balance sheet total of 5.65 million versus 5.5 million at the end of 2018. And the financial statements were signed by the president and myself. And then the income account set up in the same way, and you'll see from the numbers here that, that the government grants of 1.5 million are our largest income item, and they represent 26% of revenue of the BNT. And then we have contributions from non-profit organizations, other gifts and donations, and also some in-kind donations. So those donations and non-profit contributions amount to about 2.1 million, or about 36% of the income in 2019. So the two combined, the government grants and donations, etc., amount to about 62% of our income, and the other 38%, apart from this one-off insurance claim proceeds related to Hurricane Dorian, the rest of it is raised from revenue generating activities, from park fees, moorings, anchorage fees, and tours, events, Discovery Club income, retail sales, and so on. And virtually all of that has disappeared since the pandemic began. So while we've received the government grants, we've continued to receive contributions for the specific projects, and certain of those non-profit organizations have allowed some of those funds to be used in general operations. And we have received some donations, but not this amount of 800,000 yet. We haven't received the other, I guess on an annualized basis, 2.1 million in revenue. So we'll probably end up this year with less than half the revenue that we received in 2019. The Heritage Fund, you'll see, earned about 245,000 in income in 2019. And then on the expense side, we have our salaries and benefits, of which represent about 38% of our total costs. And then we have the kind of offset projects supported by non-profit organizations, the cost of our events, depreciation on the various assets, and then the rest of the expenses are fairly normal, business expenses that you would see in a Bahamian business. The maintenance on vehicles and boats is quite high for the BNT because mainly because of the boats in the Exuma Keys and the Sea Park. So the end result of all of this is in 2019 we had a comprehensive income of 121,000, but that was bolstered by the investments in the Heritage Fund. So our operational loss was 124,000. That's not a cash loss because depreciation here is a non-cash item. So the cash flow was managed within the budget for that particular year. And I'd just like to sort of reiterate the President's point that in 2019 we, for the first time in history, or certainly as long as I've been involved with the BNT, we had our first park turn a profit, and that's the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park, which turned a profit last year of about $297,000 through increased anchorage, moorings, very, very strong, robust team down there, wardens and so on, and some new boats now that have been donated. So the activities down there are, and that's what we're trying to do with the other parks, to sort of create profitable revenue generating activities while obviously still fully respecting the environment that they're in. and the Lucaya National Park is obviously the next one, which, you know, at its peak was earning, had quite a lot of visitors from the cruise ships to Grand Bahama. You know, there are funds set aside for that from the pig roast, as the president mentioned, to build a visitor centre, you know, once things get back to normal. So I think the president really talked about what we've done in terms of, so that was all I wanted to mention on the audited financial statements. Like I said, there's a lot of information in here for anyone who's interested. For all of the different account balances, you can see the breakdown of what's in those, and so on. So before I move on, does anyone have any questions on the audited financials? Okay. So just on the COVID situation, the president really talked about all of the initiatives we've been taking. You know, we have, since we received the government subvention in July, and with the sort of cash float that we had at that point, you know, we are expecting to be able to sweat out the rest of the year, with assuming we get some income from the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park in particular, because there is some activity there expected. I was there last week. You know, there were a number of yachts down there using the facilities, but certainly not as many as we would normally see. So, you know, we have sufficient cash flow through to the end of the year. Hopefully we'll then receive the next government subvention, and with the work that's being done by the development committee, you know, keep things going. But this is really on a shoestring. I mean, the management team have been running an extremely tight ship, only essential expenditure as we kind of weather this storm, which and none of us really know how long it's going to go on for. So we do have the backup of the income from the Heritage Fund, as I mentioned, as a backup, which I would hope that if this carries on, you know, we would only have to use at some point next year. So that's all I had to say on the financials, and I'd like to move on to the appointment of auditors. I think I can unshare my screen now. Okay, so with respect to the auditors, as I mentioned, Baker Tilly have been the BNT auditors for a number of years now, and every year have come through with audits. It's often at the last minute. Everyone's scrambling, but when you have a very tight deadline, that's usually the case. And you know, we're very appreciative of Baker Tilly's work. Like I said, the auditor statements are on the BNT website, and definitely encourage you to take a look. And if you do have any other questions on them, you know, Kay and her team at the BNT would be more than happy to answer them. So Baker Tilly have indicated their willingness to continue as our auditors, and I'd like to ask for a motion for them to be reappointed as auditors. Do we have? I've got to see the.
We have a motion from Matt Jeffrey to appoint the auditors. We would need a second.
I think John Zayak has, John Zayak has,
Okay.
Great. Thank you both.
Great. So unless there's any further questions, that's the end of my report this evening.
Thank you, Simon. And as Simon has indicated, we are also always happy to entertain questions if they come up at a later date. We'd now like to move on to the introduction of the new council members, and we're going to ask Janet Johnson, past president Janet, the one who got me into this mess, Janet, thanks, to lead her report of the nominations committee.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just bringing up my screen. Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, Bahamas National Trust members and council members. Thank you for joining us this evening for the National Trust's virtual annual general meeting. The nomination committee did not receive more nominations than required for council, so we have a slate for you. I'm pleased to introduce you to the council members for 2020-2021. Appointed members to council are Governor General Award, Dr. Livingston Marshall. Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, yours truly. Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, Gregory Bethel. Ministry of the Environment, Rochelle Newbold. University of the Bahamas, Dr. Rodney Smith. Institution representatives are American Museum of Natural History, Dr. Felicity Arango. University of Florida, Dr. Karen Bijondel. U.S. National Park Service, Christopher Hughes. National Audubon Society, Matt Jeffries. Smithsonian Institution is yet to be appointed. The Wildlife Conservation Society is yet to be appointed. And the University of Miami is Dr. Pamela Reed. Scientific advisors include Dr. Dan Brumbaugh and Dr. Alan Bolton. Tonight, persons nominated include President Jeff Andrews, Marvin Arrington, past President Glenn Bannister, Kevin Cartwright, Hank Ferguson, Andy Fowler, Colin Higgs, Marcus Lang, George Malin, Rochelle Lightbourne Graham, past President Neil McKinney, Karen Sanchez, Joanne Smith, Patrick Thompson, and Treasurer Simon Townend. I ask at this time that the slate be read. If anyone has any objections, please raise your hand in the chat. No objections have been received. The 15 nominees introduced at this meeting are now elected to council for the ensuing year. Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Janet. And thank you to those persons, the appointed council members. Thank you for your continued efforts, and certainly the elected council members. We thank you for continuing to offer your services to the BNT Council. At this point, there are no...
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just to read into the record that Janet had inadvertently not mentioned the Minister of Education's representative is Ms. Patrice Green.
Okay, thank you. So noted. And I should say that the two unfilled positions, appointed positions, are not from a lack of effort on our part. We have certainly tried during my time, and I'm sure before, to have persons appointed from those institutes, but to date we have not had success. In any event, that brings us to the end of our formal agenda. We would accept any questions or any other business if there are any at this time. Again, you are offered the opportunity to put anything in the chat. I'm not sure if there is anything out there in the chat at this point.
Not at this time.
Okay. With that, then, I would like to once again thank the BNT staff for their excellent efforts throughout this difficult year and for all the great efforts and great accomplishments in 2019. I'd like to thank the council members and certainly the outgoing council members, Dino Moss and Lanice Flowers, who were not able to continue due to work commitments, and Ed Fields, who had stepped down as the Governor General's representative. But thank the outgoing and past council members, as well as the incoming. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the members, for your continued support of this great organization and for attending this virtual AGM. It was a challenge, but thanks to the team, we got through it. And we look forward to you continuing to support the trust. Look for those upcoming events. Go and support them virtually, and hopefully we can see you all in person sometime in the not so distant future. With that, have a great evening, and thank you again. And does that just end it?